Comprised of as many riffs and grooves and that signature, bitingly sarcastic Keith Buckley lyrical value, the Damned Things return 9 years later with High Crime.
We are stars colliding, we are selves dividing. We have all the time in the world, but never the timing. We are stars colliding.
The Damned Things are a supergroup that comprise members of Fall Out Boy, Every Time I Die and Anthrax, and now the newly appointed Dan Andriano brings in an element from Alkaline Trio. Their ideas all reside within the realms of blues, hardcore and classic heavy metal. And particularly in High Crimes, I think blues is a real forerunner on this album. However, despite all of these different bands, there are commonalities that lie within the Damned Things on High Crimes, and that's their fantastic use of choruses, as evidenced on Invincible or Carry a Brick. But it's interesting to think that despite the red herring that is Cells, and it kind of, sets the album up to be an incredibly aggressive affair, it's actually quite tame and really is quite mid-tempo, quite slow, and very much in that bluesy arena. And the fact that High Crimes is not a Venomous album is both one of the reasons I enjoy the album, but also one of the reasons that it didn't quite get there with me. This band released their first album 9 years ago, and I mean, if you take Fall Out Boy, for example, that band have gone through such a major transition that it's almost unfair to say that you should penalise this band for trying something new. However, for me, there are particular kind of offenders which do stick out a little bit. For example, the second single, Something Good, I just feel that it's not gelling with the overall rest of the album, and it does kind of stick out a bit like a sore thumb, and for me it was the only real track that I had trouble with. But I also enjoyed the more experimental nature of this record, for example on Storm Charmer, which is overall quite slow. It even starts with this kind of like a prog feel to it, particularly with the keyboards, but then goes off into this more blues-oriented sound. Nevertheless, the Damned Things' iconic sound remains on Young Hearts, which is, the Damned Things through and through it. I also think that Young Hearts not only picks up the pace of the record, but brings us into that area of familiarity that perhaps is not quite throughout the record, and will kind of help the people who are really kind of looking for another Ironoclast here. However, the knockout track for me on this album has to be Omen, and this is a real kind of bluesy, almost quite doomy sounding song really, and it's characterised by this sort of very slow palm muting, almost Black Sabbath style riff. There's such a big characteristic and it has a real identity on this record, but particularly in the chorus section on Omen. And I think that both Storm Charmer and Omen are perfect examples of the Damned Things' newer sound that they're trying to implement on this album. The bass work on this album is absolutely second to none. Like, you can hear it on Cells, where it might be just a, kind of like a quick noodle here and then going into the actual riff itself, but it not only carries the riff so well and makes it for an easy transition in songwriting, but allows for almost like a lead playing aesthetic. And there were certain sections on this album where it did kind of get into a bit of a lull, which is why I found it a bit harder to kind of really resonate with the record. But overall, there are some absolutely fantastic moments, particularly vocally with Buckley. He's able to weave in and out of the melodies of the instruments and creating his own melodies at the same time, but then somehow slide back into the original melody and make it sound perfect. But The Fire Is Cold is probably one of my favourites because it's overall the heaviest track on the album, I would say. It features double bass, and Buckley really kind of gets let off the leash on this one as well and goes full Every Time I Die, really screaming the house down. And I thought it was really great to have that as the final track. And that's one of the things, is I feel that the album was slightly contrived of that energy that we had on Ironoclast originally. There's also some fantastic emphasis on harmonies on this record. I think it's a lot more guitar driven, and the fact fact that it's a bit slower allows for more space to be heard, basically. Without a doubt, this is an album that's going to take time, I think, for fans to really, really appreciate it. And it does need a bit of, you know, TLC. You need to kind of sit with it for a while. But when you do, it starts to reveal so many different layers and different depths that you may not have seen already. So for that reason, there are some positives and negatives with this album, and I think it would be fair to give it a 3.5 out of 5. I hope you guys have a wonderful Easter. Thank you so much for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure to check out all my interviews, album reviews, all the usual stuff. And I will see you guys next week for another album review. Alright, take care, friends.